Today I'm just doing a simple film analysis called Chocolat. This film was directed by Claire Denis. Claire Denis is a French filmmaker who was born in France and Paris, but she grew up in colonial Africa. The opening of Chocolat shows the adult France going back to Cameroon, and we end up knowing that she's back there to just visit her old place. You know, I suppose the nostalgia to see how things were, um, and she might have missed the people around. She might as wanted to see Protée again, and she wanted uh, to see the outcome of the place, to see how everything resulted. She was living in a colonial Cameroon. Now, when Cameroon got its independence, I believe she's back there to see what happened when Cameroon gained its independence. There's a sense of discovery, in a way, to the reason why she's back in Africa. The opening of this film shows her looking at two black people playing on a beach, and she just stares at them. She's taking about how they're enjoying their time. We have Jonathan, the African American who has moved to Cameroon with his son. And the opening scene with horizon right in front of them, and the sea is quite powerful in a way. France and Protée have a very interesting relationship. We see that Protée teaches France the language of Cameroon. Protée teaches France the wisdom of Cameroon in the sense of riddles. At the same time, we see that Protée knows, even though France, she's just a little girl, France, in the eyes of the colonial white people in Cameroon, France is superior to Protée simply because she's a little white girl. There's a scene where Protée is eating a butterfly, and France says that you disgust me. Protée looks at France and replies, nigger, indicating that France should say, you disgust me, nigger. This is a way of Protée saying that even though France is just a child, that is how France should somehow treat Protée, even though France really respects Protée, and France is just a little kid who's enjoying her time in Africa, and France is a child who respects the company of Protée. And their relationship explains how colonialism divides people and puts people in such a harsh boxes simply because of the country of their origin and the color of their skin. We see the kindness of Protée when we learn that he's working for this French family, so he will make some money to support his family back home. This is shown in this scene right here.
Chers parents, je vous laisse ici en vous souhaitant longue vie et bonne santé. Que Dieu vous garde. À nous revoir.
Protée is just a native who is the family's household servant, who was always called the boy. You know, Protée, in the eyes of the French people that are living in colonial Cameroon, he's just a little boy. He's just a guy that's walking there who should now feel privileged for the fact that these white men are giving him a job. That's the perspective of many people from France who are living in Cameroon are exactly like that. They are the whites who are superior to the blacks. In the film, there's a scene where Protée was fighting Luke, and Protée was fighting Luke because Luke was treating him like a child, calling him names, downgrading him, disrespecting him, telling him that he's worse than the priests that raised him. Tell him to go and lick the boots of his bosses. Protée is the type of a character that love to treat people with respect. The people that respect him, he'll treat them with respect. So when Luke was belittling Protée decided to take the sheet that Luke sleeps in and throws it out. After that, a fight breaks out. A fight breaks out between Luke and Protée. And Protée, being a strong character himself, he ended up winning that fight. He ended up causing Luke to literally run away and never come back to the house. The relationship between Protée and Aimé, it's somehow rocky. Protée being a servant and Aimé being the wife of Marc, a French administrator. Protée knows exactly where he belongs. Protée knows that my job is to simply clean this house, bring in food and make sure every single thing is going smooth in this house. Whenever Marc was away doing his administration work around Cameroon, Protée was always the one that's there for Aimé. There's a scene where Aimé hears the sound of a hyena outside and she feels that this hyena might come in and kill her and her daughter. Aimé calls Protée to come in and protect her from the hyenas. Aimé gives Protée a gun, and Protée literally sits down and sits down with a gun like a guard. And we see exactly that Protée has taken this role of a father figure, of a protector. And in a way, Aimé has a lot of respect and love for Protée, because Protée always guides her. Aimé wanting to show affection to Protée, she wanted to touch Protée's leg. I don't know what Aimé wanted the result to end up being. I think from my perspective, this scene opens up with Aimé sitting down, feeling down, holding our legs, looking like a very broken animal, a very broken character. But Protée being a strong, respected character, when Aimé was touching his leg, Protée backs off and tells Aimé to warm him up. Protée literally lifts Aimé up, and Protée walks out. Protée knew exactly how to behave in a society where the whites were being perceived as a superior class. And these colonial powers were degrading him simply because he's a black-skinned human being. So Protée didn't want to indulge with anything that Aimé wanted, simply because he respected himself so much. There's a scene in the film where Aimé, she's preparing to dance with Jonathan, a guest who just came in, this English guest. And she was closing the back of her dress, but she couldn't reach certain part, and she asked Protée to help her close the back of her dress. Protée, being a house servant and being afraid to even look a white woman in the eyes, it's not just any white woman, she's a woman of an administrator. Basically, she's a woman of his boss. Protée end up having this awkward moment, this harsh moment, where he sees himself as lower than Aimé simply because he's a house servant. He sees himself as lower than Aimé also because he's an African who's working in a house of people that colonize his country. So because of colonization, you end up creating this moment of separation. You end up creating these bridges between two people. Aimé and Protée, clearly they have a connection, but this connection will simply never come to life because of colonization and because of the different classes they're in. Aimé, she's a kind and loving and understanding colonizer in Cameroon. We see this one, she suggested that Protée to get a different job, to stop working in the house because that job it's somehow destroying him. So she's the loving type. Now we have Luke. At first he presents himself as the saint, when he's not. He's a colonizer that simply has this side of loving everyone, but deep down he simply perceives his white skin as superior. We see this example where this black doctor was brought to I suppose heal this woman who was sick, but this doctor couldn't figure out how to heal her, and he suggested they look for a different person. And then Luke just goes right in front of this doctor and tells him that he's not worth enough to even wipe the eyes of a white man. Okay, there's a guy in the film as well who's planting coffee. I'm not gonna bother looking for his name, you can search for that, but this clip explains exactly what in his head. This guy simply sees himself as a colonizer who want to run Africa. He wants to be the one in charge. That's why when he was asking the two visitors to take them where he wanted to go, and he offered them to pay. He offered to pay them, but they refused. He got pissed off, and he asked Aimé, do they run things around here? I thought we whites run things around here. Mark is the administrator around Cameroon. And Mark is the type of a colonizer that loves to learn as much as he can about the people in the country that he has colonized. Mark is the type that loves to learn the culture of the people, and Mark is the type that loves the African land in a way, the African landscape, the animals and the trees. And someone who's reading Mark is diary. There was one line where Mark said that he preferred the dark skin over the white skin. There's a scene in the film where we see Mark visiting this old man, and this old man addressing a problem with lions that's coming over and eating the food. Mark suggests that he'll organize a beating. This old man tells him that the suggestion of a white man isn't good enough, that this lion must be hunted, that a man must hunt a lion. So we see Mark as I suppose the type of a colonizer that want to understand the environment that he's in, and at the same time is an administrator, a family man. This sort of like feeds in his character. Protée wanted France not to forget about him. That whenever independence comes in Cameroon, France to remember that place, to remember who Protée was, to remember what she went through, and not to take every single thing on granted. That burned hand was simply a symbol of memories, of remembrance. I think Claire Denise explains this perfectly in this video.
I would like to say that about Chocolat and the burnt hand, it's not explained, but to me, there was no possible explanation. There was something in me that thought that maybe the only thing he could tell the little girl is, remember me, remember who I was after the independence, when you will be back in France. And as if this similar burnt in the palm of the hand would be a mark of something they have been observing together. The fact that he was a boy servant, but treated not really as a complete adult grown man, because he was just the fact that the word in Francophone and Anglophone Africa for servant was boy, means that they were never growing up in a way, you know. And even some boys reached the age of 50, over 50, they were grandfather and they were still called a boy, as if they were caught in a sort of cage of the word boy, never man.
Francois Fanon aimed to understand the complex ways in which identity is constructed and produced. He asked the question, what does the black man want? And he ended up realizing that the black man who were living under the power of colonialism, they always want to be like the whites. He called it an inferior complex, in which you want to become, you know, like the one in which you want to become like the one who has a lot of power in your country. You know, the inferior complex. You start to suppose fear the white man who is in your country, and you think to be wealthy and to be great and to be amazing is not to be yourself, is to be like other, which is the others that are better than you, that perceive themselves as better than you. Instead of you creating your own culture, you start to copy the culture of the ones that you're inferior about, the whites. This can be connected with the film Chocolat, when we end up realizing that Protée proudly call himself boy, the boy. Protée is not really like young boy, he's an adult man, but calling himself a boy simply puts him in a cage. He feels like he's trapped in a way, that's who he is, that's his new identity. Inferior complex is trying to be pushed on the blacks in Cameroon, because the whites keeps on presenting themselves as superior.
Orientalism tries to answer the question of why, when we think of the Middle East, for example, we have a preconceived notion of what kind of people live there, what they believe, how they act, even though we may never have been there or indeed even met anyone from there. More generally, Orientalism asks, how do we come to understand people, strangers, who look different to us by virtue of the color of their skin? The central argument of Orientalism is that the way we acquire this knowledge is not innocent or objective, but the end result of a process that reflects certain interests. That is, it is highly motivated. Specifically, Said argues that the way the West, Europe and the US, looks at the countries and peoples of the Middle East is through a lens that distorts the actual reality of those places and those people. He calls this lens through which we view that part of the world Orientalism.
was the constant sort of disparity I felt between what my experience of being an Arab was and the representations of that one saw in art. I mean, I'm talking about very great artists, you know, like Delacroix and Ingres and Jérôme and people like that, novelists who wrote about the Orient, you know, like Disraeli or Flaubert. And, you know, the fact that those representations of the Orient had very little to do with what I knew about my own background in life. So I decided to write the history of that.
One thing I really respect about Claire Denis is whenever she's directing a film, especially Chocolat, I didn't feel like I was intruding. I felt like I was observing. The film was a great observation of Africa in a way. If you ask me a question, how did Claire Denis represent Africa? As an African myself, I would simply tell you that she represented Africa with 100% accuracy, because that's how Africa looks like today. Now, Africa is a continent, and South Africa can't be compared to Congo. But there are strong elements of African structures, African agricultures, African houses that in this film, and it's beautiful in a way. In the closing scene, we see three Africans picking up African artifacts, African sculptures, and putting them on a big airplane that simply going to Europe. And we know these artifacts will be, you know, just sculptures in a museum somewhere for the Europeans to observe what Africa is, or what Africa used to be, in a way, for Europeans to learn about the tribes of Africa, and learn about Africa from an outsider's perspective. It's quite sad in a way. At the same time, the film closes by showing three African men just enjoying themselves, talking and smoking and pissing, and they are free. You know, the film ends with the sense of freedom, as we see them just standing by and just being themselves without much of intrusion.